Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 1990s. It's been a few weeks, so let's get into it.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Now, before we start off the episode, I do want to address the elephant in the room. Well, I guess that's me. But anyway, reason there hasn't been an episode the last couple weeks, I've been like battling all kinds of stuff. I got like the night before I was going to film this episode actually, I got like sick like that quick, like runny nose out of nowhere. The next day a bad cough and I could not breathe to save my life, literally. I had this horrible respiratory infection, and for the first time ever in my life, I was admitted to the hospital. I was there for 3 days, I think, on all kinds of antibiotics. Get out, still feeling horrible. The next day, stuff with my eye starts. The stuff I've had a couple times this year, a blocked tear duct, but with this infection that I'd had, it like made this a million times worse. I'm going to insert a picture now what I looked like. This is like 1 o'clock, 1 a.m. Wednesday morning. And now you can see now, there's a little sore there, but I mean, it's mostly gone. It's been another 3, almost 4 days in the hospital for that one in Louisville, on a ton more antibiotics, and finally feels like I feel back to normal. I feel like myself again. I'm going to have surgery on that. I'm going to have surgery on my heart for my WPW, which if you don't know what that is, it's a condition where I have an extra pathway in my heart, and it sometimes my heart will get into a loop where it'll go on the wrong pathway, and it'll go from, like, I'm sitting here, it'll be like 70 all the way up to 190 and then up into the 220s. And luckily it hasn't gone to a dangerous pattern. It's I can't remember what they said it was, what the pattern it's gone into, but anyway, gonna have surgery on that too. So a lot of stuff coming down the road, but hopefully I'm out of the woods now on this health stuff, and we can get here to talk about what I wanted to talk about originally. Was episode number 54, June of 1993. Before I mention that though, was supposed to have a bonus episode come out that week, so obviously that hasn't happened. Haven't even done the interview with my brother yet. It's all about video games. I'm going to have it come out the last day of the month this month. Just give me time to put it together. It's December. That's next month. That's coming up soon. November 30th, 2025. I don't know how to put the last date on there, just in case you didn't know what year it was. Anyway, so it's the last day of the month. It's a Sunday. It's all about video games. I'm going to interview my brother, my wife, if she wants to be part of it, and just talking about video games, not really ranking anything, just giving my experience with all the different video game systems I've played and everything. And then, like I said, that'll be the last day of the month. But right now we're going to talk about June of 1993. This is actually my 9th trip through 1993, so we're 3/4 of the way there. Of getting done with the whole year. At this time I was 9 years old and in between 3rd and 4th grade. And first let's talk about some food items. Taco Bell released a new item then, as they do now, and they take it away. Back then they used to not do that. That's their strategy now, is just, well, we're going to introduce this food and then we're going to take it off the market and people are going to want it back, and then we're going to bring it back and we're going to sell a ton more. That's, I mean, you can't argue with it working, because it does. It's just a crappy way to treat your customers. But it's the freaking nacho fries, and you quit taking them away. But anyway, during June of 1993, they released a new chicken and steak fajita wraps, trying to go along with the more health conscious thing and try to get more fresh food. Didn't last, obviously, A lot of things at Taco Bell didn't last. A lot of things that a lot of places tried didn't last. Like McDonald's at this time they released the McLobster, which sounds like a bad pun. Like, oh yeah, they came out with a McLobster. They really did. It was a lobster, and it was served on a hot dog bun as the roll. They also tested out an idea called a McStuffins, which was like a Hot Pocket type of sandwich that they would sell. They would have, I think the flavors were chicken teriyaki and Philly cheesesteak, and those didn't catch on, obviously. Neither did the McLobster roll. It went away, too. And it was also during this time that Domino's discontinued its 30 minutes or it's free guarantee. Of course, we see that in the, as you can see what I'm wearing here, the Turtles movie. I think it was the first one, where they order pizza and they wait like an extra minute. No, wait, I'm wrong on that. I was combining two movies. They do that in the movie, but the one I'm thinking of where they wait is Leprechaun 2, where the old guy Morty, he stands there and waits at the door until it's 31 minutes open and says, "It's 31 minutes, it's free." Yeah, Domino's discontinued that because there was actually people with like lawsuits and all because like there was actually like a couple cases where drivers like drove recklessly and got into accidents, so that way they got the pizza delivered on time. So they didn't, because I mean if it was the driver's fault, the driver ended up probably having to pay for the pizza. Nothing's totally free. So they probably there was a couple of them that were driving recklessly and caused accidents. That Domino's is like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. We're going to get in too much trouble for this. So yeah, you can't just order pizza now and it don't get there in 30 minutes. You get it for free, unfortunately. Thank American lawsuits once again. But we're going to move into sports now. Of course, during June, still in at the ending part, but still in the first part of the baseball season. Of course, back then it was the Western and Eastern divisions of the National League and the American League. Not like today where you got 3 divisions. There was 2 then, and people were in divisions they didn't belong in. Like the Reds were in the West Division. Like, we're not in the western part of the country. Anyway, the leaders for the NL were the Giants and the Phillies. Reds were 5th place in the Western Division, 14 games back. The American League leaders were the Blue Jays and the White Sox. And, of course, this was the year that the Blue Jays beat the Phillies to win the World Series. Players of the month, Andres Galarraga and John Olerud. And the pitchers of the month were Chris Hammond and Darryl Kyle, and also Rick Aguilera. And like I said, the baseball, they were getting ready to, of course, this was the year before the crappy strike, but they were getting ready to go into the All-Star break at the beginning of July. And, of course, that's kind of the midpoint of the season. Some NASCAR news. Dale Earnhardt won the Budweiser 500 at Dover. And then, he'd go on that year to win his 6th championship in November. 6 out of 7. Kyle Petty also won the Champion Spark Plug 500 at Pocono. And Ricky Rudd won the Miller Genuine Draft 400 at Michigan International Speedway. I still don't know why they call that Michigan International Speedway. What about Michigan is international? Anyway. One other news of note in the sports world. The Chicago Bulls became the first team since the 60s to win 3 NBA Finals championships in a row. I think that's what they call their championship. I don't follow NBA at all, but I'm pretty sure they call their, like the World Series for baseball, Super Bowl for football, I believe they just call it the NBA Finals. Seems so, like, anticlimactic, like, can't you call it the NBA Championship? It's the NBA Finals. Anyway, speaking of championships and everything, we're going to talk about wrestling. There was, WWF held their very first King of the Ring pay-per-view. Not the first tournament of the King of the Ring, but the first pay-per-view. And this is the first time they'd done another pay-per-view. I think they did this Tuesday in Texas. But up until then, it'd been their traditional WrestleMania and then Survivor Series, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble. You know, the big 4. This is the first time they'd started another one that would continue. And that was, like I said, the King of the Ring. It was June 13th from Dayton, Ohio. This was a pretty big pay-per-view. This is where Yokozuna beat WWF champion Hulk Hogan, thanks to some crap that I'm sure Hogan had a hand in. To win anyway. Yokozuna won the title back that Hogan took from him at WrestleMania when he wasn't even supposed to be in the main event. But yeah, a Japanese, because they had cameramen out there, a Japanese cameraman went up there and his flash went off and it blew up in Hogan's face or something. Like, of course they couldn't have Hogan just beat Yokozuna, even though Hogan was leaving the company. Anyway, this would be Hogan's final televised match in the WWF until 2002. He had a couple on like overseas tours, but they obviously weren't televised. But yeah, Hogan and his stuff, I tell you. Bret Hart actually won the King of the Ring tournament. He last eliminated Bam Bam Bigelow. His path to actually winning the tournament, though, he actually got, for the first time in the tournament history, he got a first round bye because he was the last WWF champion. Because, of course, you know, that whole thing at WrestleMania where Yokozuna beat him for the title and then Hogan beat Yokozuna when he was supposed to be in it, like I said before. But yeah, he received a first round bye for that for some reason. I don't know. I guess they didn't have another competitor or something. But then on the actual pay-per-view, he pinned Razor Ramon, Mr. Perfect, and then Bam Bam Bigelow. So beating all three of those legends in one night, I mean, you know, the King of the Ring was really... he'd already won the championship, like I said already, and he was already in the main event scene, but this King of the Ring kind of, like, cemented him as, like, yeah, you're definitely the champion. Because when he won the title originally, he beat Ric Flair for it at a house show, and then he'd lost to Yokozuna at the pay-per-view, so, like, this is kind of his, like, proving point here, and really got a lot more fan support from King of the Ring 93 on. Bret Hart was, you know, one of the top guys, and until he turned heel and did the whole Canada versus USA thing in 97. Or was that 96? It might have started in 90s. No, it's 97. Yeah, that was definitely a fun time. ECW was just starting out. Definitely wasn't Extreme Championship Wrestling. They were still Eastern Championship Wrestling. They had their very first supercard, which, if you don't know what that is, it's like a pay-per-view, or I guess they call it PLE now, except it's not on pay-per-view. It's just like, it's bigger than a normal, like, regular event for them. Just like with WCW's Clash of the Champions, which I'll talk about in a minute, that's considered a supercard, basically, even though this wasn't televised. Anyway, it was the Super Summer Sizzler Spectacular at June 19th from the ECW Arena, of course, in Philadelphia. The main event, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert with Paul E. Dangerously, and Eddie Gilbert was actually booking the company at this time. Paul E. Dangerously, of course, mostly known as Paul Heyman. He would, of course, famously end up not only booking the company, but, you know, owning the company. But at this time, and Eddie Gilbert was the booker. Anyway, he defeated Terry Funk in the Texas Chain Match Massacre, which is just like a Texas bull rope match, except they use a chain instead of a bull rope. He won that to win the title of King of Philadelphia. And yeah, that was their very first supercard, and then, of course, they would go on to do a bunch of those, and they'd end up, that's where they'd get most of their TV shows from, is they'd do those big events, you know, once a month usually at the ECW Arena. Sometimes they go to other places, and they would just, you know, make their TV shows off of that. They'd do that forever, and, of course, they'd get on pay-per-view, and they'd still do their supercards and stuff. But, yeah, early days of ECW, nothing extreme. I mean, there was obviously some hardcore wrestling in that Texas chain match. But, yeah, just very much a territory, if you know, in every sense of the word. You know, they were in Philadelphia, a little bit in New York. They were just Eastern Championship Wrestling. And, of course, you know, like I said, Paul Heyman was there as a manager, but, you know, it wouldn't be too long, a couple months would go by, and he'd end up being the booker, and like I said, ended up owning the company. WCW had their Clash of the Champions 23, which was their, not a pay-per-view, but bigger than a regular show. Of course, during this time, 1993, the big show on TV for WCW, of course, was Saturday night. They didn't have Monday Nitro yet. So it was WCW Saturday night was where they had their big, you know, big angles, big matches. And, of course, back then you didn't have, like, these huge matches like you do today where you have, you know, star versus star. That started with Nitro. You know, when Nitro and Raw were going head-to-head, they had to start putting all their stars on TV. It wasn't like it used to be where you'd have, your big star and come in and face some like local guy or some lower on the card guy just to just to show off your star. But Clash of the Champions was, like I said, a bigger show. They had typically a lot of titles on the line, and they treated it like a pay-per-view. I remember, because we didn't get to watch pay-per-views, I remember like when WCW would have their Clash of the Champions, I would be like so hyped up. I was like, yeah, Clash of the Champions is tonight. It'd be like getting to watch a pay-per-view. But this is the 23rd one here, June 16th from Norfolk, Virginia. The main event was Ric Flair and Arn Anderson defeating WCW and NWA World Tag Team Champions, the Hollywood Blondes, 2-0 in a 2 out of 3 falls match. But they didn't win the titles because Barry Windham interfered, getting the Blondes disqualified. So, that old rule where you can't win the title on disqualification. Well, I guess they made that happen in a 2 out of 3 falls match. I guess if you get disqualified, it counts there too. But it's just stupid. I've seen other 2 out of 3 falls matches where there's been disqualifications and it hasn't affected the title outcome. But anyway, couple other title changes that happened in this month. Shawn Michaels defeated WWF Intercontinental Champion Marty Jannetty for the title June 6th at a house show. And then we got a bunch of changes here. The Steiner Brothers defeated WWF Tag Team Champions Money Inc., which of course was $1 Million Man and IRS. They defeated them for the titles June 14th at a house show. Then Money Inc. would win them back on another house show 2 days later. Then the Steiner Brothers won them back at yet another house show 3 days after that. So kind of title flopping there. They didn't do that a whole lot, but I don't know exactly if there was a reason behind it. I know there's been a few times at house shows like title changes happened and wasn't even supposed to. And then they just, fix it. They'll, somebody win it back the next time. I don't know if that's the case here. I don't know why the titles changed hands that much. Just something to, to get a bigger crowd. Like, hey, you got to come out and see the house show. You never know. Because they'll do that sometimes. Of course, nowadays it's a completely different business model. They don't do house shows. What you see on TV is basically what they do. Other than they might do a special event here or there. It's nothing like it used to be. Where they would, have 200, 250, 300 dates a year on the road. I mean, I guess it's a lot better for the wrestlers now. And as much money as they charge now, they make as much as that if they did 300 shows. Their prices are ridiculous these days. But anyway, we're talking about these days of June of 1993. And I want to talk a little bit about some music. Of course, I always check out the Billboard charts for the pop music and the American Country Countdown for the country music. On the Hot 100 Billboard charts, That's the Way Love Goes by Janet Jackson was #1 for the whole month, plus 3 weeks in May and 1 week in July for 8 weeks total. And for 8 weeks at #1, I literally have still never heard this song. The only song I know that's called That's the Way Love Goes was by Merle Haggard, okay? And I guarantee you that's not this song. But like I said, I was listening to country music, so of course I wouldn't have known a pop song. But it's weird that I've still never heard that song, even though I've listened to a whole bunch of pop music since late 90s on. But anyway, American Country Countdown, there was a big song, and I'm surprised it only went to #1 for 2 weeks, but it ended up being the most played song on country radio throughout the 90s, and that is Should Have Been a Cowboy by Toby Keith. Yeah, I'm surprised it only went to #1 for 2 weeks, but like with country music, even 2 weeks is at #1 is rare back then. There was a lot of competition, so it was hard to stay on top. But like I said, the most played song through the 90s, and it came out in 93, so it ain't like it even had, it had only had 7 years of airplay, but I mean, that song was everywhere. Everybody knows that. Even people never even heard country music have probably heard that song. The other #1 for the month, that for 2 weeks, was Blame It On Your Heart by Patti Loveless. And most people know that as the full, she don't list it as the full title, but it's, let's see if I can do it from memory here. Blame it on your lying, cheating, no good, beating. Oh, I messed that up already. Blame it on your lying, cheating, no good, beating, 2-time, and kill me now. If the song was playing, I'd get it, but It's a whole list of stuff. Fun song. During this month, they actually had the 27th annual TNN Music City News Awards, which was an award show by TNN, the I always say the National Network because that's what it became, the Nashville Network. I always mess that up, say the wrong name. The Nashville Network's award show. It was the 27th annual one. Some of the winners here: Entertainer of the Year, Alan Jackson, of course, 1993. You know, it was usually either him or Garth Brooks. Album of the Year, I Still Believe in You, Vince Gill. Man, that's a great album and a great song for sure. Male Artist of the Year, Alan Jackson. Female Artist of the Year, Reba McEntire. No surprises there. Vocal Group of the Year, The Statlers. I love the Statlers. Nothing wrong with them. But in 1993, they weren't doing anything. Like, they weren't being played on the radio, and I'm not saying, you know, whether they should have been or not. You know, I'd never heard their music to even judge how they were still doing, but it seemed like every year on this award show, they would win that award. Like, I get it, you know, they're legends, but, you know, you don't see them giving awards to, like, I don't know. It'd be like, you know, I love Travis Tritt, but if they gave him Singer of the Year this year and he hasn't released a song, it'd be like, what the heck? The Grammys do a lot of that weird stuff. They'll name people nobody's even heard of, and you know, like that's supposed to be so good, and I've never even heard of it. But anyway, like I said, nothing wrong with the Statlers. They just always got that Vocal Group of the Year. And like I said, in 1993, I don't even know if were still putting out albums. Anyway, Vocal Duo of the Year, Brooks and Dunn. I can definitely get behind that one. Vocal Band of the Year, Sawyer Brown. Great group. I just recorded a Tales from the Albums on them, which I haven't. I don't think I've even edited that together yet. But I did their greatest hits 1990 to 1995. Tales from the Albums, where I talk about a huge album that has, you know, almost, you know, some of the criteria is like almost every song on it's good, or, you know, it would just, like, it changed country music. I struggled with adding a greatest hits to it because it seems like a cheap way to do it. But with Sawyer Brown, I'd never, like, had any of their actual albums. I'd only, you know, listen to what was on the radio. And just, there's a lot of good music on there, so I didn't want to, you know, not talk about them. So I decided to include them on that, and that'll be out soon. It's just, I go through the CD, album, whatever you want to call it, tape, and just talk about the songs, give some, you know, some facts, you know, what place it was on the chart, and kind of what the song's talking about, that kind of thing. But anyway, it just happens to be that they're the Vocal Band of the Year. Vocal Collaboration of the Year, Marty Stewart and Travis Tritt. Those two always work well together. Their first song they did was The Whiskey Ain't Workin'. My favorite by them is probably This One's Gonna Hurt You for a Long, Long Time. And I think they did another one called Honky Tonkin's What I Do Best. Love for them to put out an album together someday. That would be awesome. Single of the Year, I Still Believe in You, Vince Gill. Like I said before, such a great song. I mean, the vocals, the message behind the song, the way the instruments are. I mean, perfect song. Video of the Year, Midnight in Montgomery. That video used to scare me as a kid, because of course the song and the video is talking about going and playing a New Year's Eve show down in Alabama, in Montgomery, and him stopping to see Hank Williams' grave at midnight, and, you know, in the video you can see, like, the ghost of Hank Williams, like the shadows, and, like, it's so creepy. Like, that song would, like, sometimes, if I would hear it at night, it would scare me. But he said he's actually went and played this song there at the grave a few times over the years. That would be, I don't know if I could deal with that. But yeah, that's Midnight in Montgomery, his tribute to Hank Williams Sr. Great video. Great song, too. Stars of Tomorrow, I always like to give I like to give the winner and the runner-up. Doug Stone won the Star of Tomorrow. He'd go on to have a great career. Just love his voice. Other nominees were Susie Boggess, which I never really liked I just couldn't get into anything she released. I'm sorry. It's not that I have something against female country singers, because I love a lot of them. I just never was a fan of hers. Billy Ray Cyrus, of course. He's turning to be a freaking weirdo with his weirdo daughter and family. But back then he was just the guy that was ruining country music, which I don't think so. Achy Breaky Heart didn't ruin country music. If you listen to what they put out in country nowadays, Achy Breaky Heart sounds like George Jones era country. Don't shoot me on that one. Billy Dean, another runner-up. He had a good career. And the one that if I would have picked out of all of them that I think I would have picked to win, the last nominee for it was Sammy Kershaw. Love Sammy Kershaw. His voice, his song Yard Sale is in probably my top 5 music ever. I love that song. I love singing that song. Such a great song. Comedian of the Year was Ray Stevens, and the Instrumentalist of the Year was Vince Gill. No surprise there. This was also the month in the year that Prince, because of crack or whatever he was on, decided to change his name to a symbol on his birthday. So, whatever. I know you're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, and I don't have any knowledge that he did anything wrong or anything. It's just, you never know what gets in these people's head. His ego was obviously so inflated that he's like, well, I'm so good now, I don't even get a name, I get a symbol. I think eventually he went back to his name, I don't know. And some sad news for this month, Connie, bear with me here, I haven't talked this long in a while, I haven't talked at all the past couple weeks, I've been so much freaking pain. But Conway, not Connie, Conway Twitty died during this month. He died during surgery. He had got sick during a performance in Branson and got rushed to the hospital and never made it out of surgery. He was 59 years old. One of the greatest of all time. I mean, I can't tell you enough how great Conway Twitty was. Of course, everybody knows Hello, Darlin'. My favorite by him, though, is It's Only Make Believe. It came out, I think, in the 50s, before Hello, Darlin', when Conway Twitty was still, started out. He was trying to be like a rock singer, like rockabilly, that type of music. And, of course, he found better success in country later on. But my favorite was always It's Only Make Believe. But, I mean, he's had number one after number one and great song after great song. Of course, That's My Job, of course, resonates with anybody with a father, especially a father that has passed away. Like, that song will get you for sure, But, I mean, all his duets with Loretta Lynn, just a great career, a great guy. Died at 59. I know that sounds, 59's an old person, but still a young age to die. And he was still making music. He was still had singles on the radio, still out there performing. Who knows what he could have done? Just tragic to see that. I remember hearing the news on the radio, and I remember my mom crying about it because she was one of his biggest fans. That hit her hard, and just goes to show you never know when something's just going to happen out of nowhere. I'll move on from that. It's kind of hard to move on and talk about anything else. Talk about sad news, but we're going to talk about a Nickelodeon lineup. I decided to do Nickelodeon because it's June, so there's no new shows on the air. I mean, there might have been during Nickelodeon, but like Saturday morning cartoons, they were all reruns, so it's hard to find the schedule for them. But we're going to go to June 10th of 1993. This was actually a Thursday, so of course we're going to start at midnight, and of course, at that time, Nick at Night's on. So we got the F Troop, the Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, the Patty Duke Show, Donna Reed Show, Get Smart, Dick Van Dyke Show, the Lucy Show, which was one of my mom's favorites. One of those 3 Lucille Ball shows is the Lucy Show, I Love Lucy, and Lucy and Desi Comedy Hour. Then we got the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Dragnet, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, love Alfred Hitchcock, The Adventures of Superman. And at 5:30 we get Nick News, which most of us kids didn't really like Nick News. It was made for kids, but still, it had news in the title, so we didn't want to watch it. But at 6 o'clock, getting ready for school. Of course, during June there was no school, but during the school year, I always remember at 6 getting up and watching Mr. Wizard's World until they took it off the air, and then I would end up watching at that same time period from 6 to 7 the Munsters on TBS. But anyway, Mr. Wizard's World, a science show. Everybody likes to talk about Bill Nye the Science Guy from the 90s, but my science guy was always Mr. Wizard. And at 6:30 we got Lassie. And at 7, Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, Yogi Bear, which is just Yogi Bear with the Nickelodeon brand on it. But nothing wrong with Yogi Bear. Love Yogi Bear. 7:30, another one like that. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. And then we've got a couple special delivery shows, which Nickelodeon special delivery was where they would just show a short cartoon or a movie or something, and they just call it the special delivery. Cricket in Times Square and Mowgli's Brothers. So, don't know what those were about, but they were on from 8 to 9. And then from 9 to 11, we get 2 hours of Eureka's Castle on Nick Jr. Oh, I love Eureka's Castle. That show was so fun. Then 11, we got Sharon, Lois, and Bram's The Elephant Show. Skin and Marinky Dinky Dink, that one. Then we got Capelli and Company, which was sort of like like The Elephant Show. Same with the next one, Fred Penner's Place. And then at 12:30, we've got Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. The episode was called The Magic Heart. Then at 1 o'clock, we got Muppet Babies, all-time great. Followed by another all-time great, The World of David the Gnome. Man, this is my lineup here. Then at 2, we go back to regular Nickelodeon. We've got Dennis the Menace. Love that cartoon. Then we got Flipper. Then we got Nickelodeon Most Wanted, Yogi Bear, and Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon again. And then at 4, my brother Josh would have been happy. One of his favorites, Underdog. I loved it too, but Josh was like obsessed with Underdog at this age. What was he then? He was 5 years old then. Yeah, he loved Underdog. Then we got Muppet Babies again. Then at 5, we've got Hey Dude. I love that show. About the teens going to work at the Bar None Ranch during the summer, and Mr. Ernst had been like a New York businessman or stockbroker or something. He all of a sudden, I'm going to go work on a dude ranch when I got divorced from my wife. Midlife crisis, career change, but made for a hilarious show. Then we got a show called 15. I don't know what that is. But at 6, we got What Would You Do, hosted by Mark Summers. I love that. Man, that show was so fun. Just a variety show with all kinds of different ways to get people with pies, and people winning prizes, and just people coming off the street and doing things. It was just such a fun show. 6:30, Wild and Crazy Kids. Sort of like a game show, but with like a... how have I described that before? Like field day, during elementary school, you have field day, the last day of school. Normally, we just go out and do all kinds of different activities outside. That was kind of what this was. There was no prizes to be won, and it really didn't keep track of points that much. It was just going out and having outdoor activities and having fun. Then at 7, we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon again. And then we end the Nickelodeon day at 7:30 with Bullwinkle's Moose-O-Rama, which is, of course, the Rocky and Bullwinkle from the 60s. And then we're back on Nick at Night for Get Smart, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Dragnet, Lucy Show, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and we end the day with The Adventures of Superman. So that is our Nickelodeon lineup, like I said, for Thursday, June 10th. Alright, let's move on and talk about video games now. I got some statistics for the best-selling video games of this month. Even though Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis were in the middle of their war, they were still putting out some games for the original Nintendo, NES. Kirby's Adventure was the best-selling game for that. For the Super Nintendo, it was Star Fox. I know that's one of those monumental games that everybody talks about, but I've just never played it. So Let me know in the comments what I'm missing with Star Fox, what I missed out on. And I got it on an emulator, so maybe I'll pick it up and play it, but I just never played it back then. Sega Genesis, the #1 game was Street Fighter 2. Played that one a lot. For Sega CD was X-Men. For Game Boy was Yoshi's Cookie, which I've never played of, never played or heard of. And for Game Gear, which is Sega's handheld system, was Batman Returns. I played Batman Returns for Sega Genesis, but I haven't played it for the Game Gear. I'm assuming it's probably similar. I got another segment that I just started recently. It's called the 5 more obsolete things from the 90s. It's this list I came upon that decided to break it down to 5 per week. I've done 2 of these so far. It seems like a lifetime ago, since it was like, I've never gone this long without recording a podcast, 2 weeks, but anyway, enough of that. Anyway, these are things that either don't exist anymore or barely do, or people don't remember them, or they're just like I said, obsolete. Handheld video game consoles. Now, I know I just talked about the Game Gear, and I know the Switch is a big one, and I'm not saying there's no handheld game consoles. I'm just talking about, and not even like Game Boy and stuff, but those, like Tiger's a big example. There was like a little handheld console of everything, like the Aladdin game. Pretty much anything that was popular then, they put out a little handheld game for. Whether it's something as simple as like Blackjack 21 or 5-card poker, you play the little handheld video games. Or like I said, those Tiger games like Aladdin. They had some turtle ones. I know they had some wrestling ones. Of course, like I said, they still have the Switch. But most people, if they're playing games, handheld games, it's usually on their phone. But there's just something about those times where you pick up one of those games and be on those little screens. It'd be hard to tell what was going on sometimes. But man, we played the crap out of those things. Another one is a dot matrix printer. And when I first seen this, I was like, what is a dot matrix printer? And then I realized what it is. It's a certain kind of printer, and if you're from the 90s, you can hear this thing going, like, every letter that gets typed out, it makes noise. It's just like, it's a whole bunch of whirring and electronic sounds. But it's, the paper that goes in it is the paper that's, like, connected. It's perforated, where you can tear it off at each page. But it's mostly known for those pages with like the holes on both sides, like the holes that you tear off of both sides. That's how they're all connected. And yeah, it was a whole different way of printing things. It wasn't like, when they came out the inkjet printer, everything was quieter, faster. But back then it was just, and you could recognize the font and the, just the way everything looked. And I remember, teachers would have giant piles of the paper and it'd be all accordion stacked because it folded out. Like I said, it was all connected, but you ripped it at the perforation and you ripped off the holes for it, unless you use those to store it somewhere. But yeah, just a whole different way. Like it's weird to think even printing back in 1993 was completely different than printing now. You can print something now, and you can print out a picture now in 10 seconds, when back then it would take you like a couple minutes to do a full typed sheet of and just printing. This is, like I said, before the inkjet printers. Another obsolete thing were Palm Pilots, or like little pocket thesaurus things. I never had a Palm Pilot, but my grandpa had a pocket thesaurus. I remember he got it, and it was like high-tech stuff back in the early 90s. But, it was just like a thing where you type in a letter, or type in a word, and it'd be like a thesaurus. Or they'd have some that had a dictionary, or there was some like the Palm Pilot where you would, it was basically just like an appointment book, a schedule, but electronically. Of course, before the days of everybody having a computer, and of course that's now part of computers, and of course, like I said, now you can do it on your phone. A lot of this stuff on this list you can do on your, like the handheld games. I mean, all this stuff, Palm Pilot, Pocket Thesaurus, a Pocket Dictionary, all that stuff can be just done on a couple different apps on a phone. And, you know, I mean, I don't even know if they have a thesaurus or a dictionary on the phone as an app when people can just Google everything. But just a different time back then with these little electronic devices that were just like so cutting edge then that are, you know, if they, whatever ones of these still exist, if they, you know, if they exist in people's homes, they're just probably sitting in storage somewhere or at the bottom of a drawer and never looked at. But if you come across any of these, you have any parents or grandparents that have these, just check them out. It's a really cool look at a different time when this was like the best technology you had to offer. The next one is cereal box toys. These days, if they give away anything on cereal boxes, which I don't even know if they do anymore, but it would most certainly be online or something. Back then, you would have two things normally. First of all, you would get a really cool cereal box where you'd get a game on the back. Sometimes you'd get like you could do word searches or mazes. Sometimes it'd be like a little board game you could cut off the box and play board games with, or just all kinds of different stuff to read and do while you're eating the cereal. It was really cool. But you either got bigger toys or products that you'd have to collect a few things and then send away for them. But a lot of times you would get a toy right in the cereal box. You know, it would come at the very bottom of the box. And, you know, it could be anything, just, you know, something small, kind of a bigger toy, just whatever would fit in there. But just like with the 20 ounces from back then where you would win a free pop. That's what we call them in Cincinnati and where I grew up. There were pops. I know there's soda and everything else everywhere else. Some places call them a Coke, even if it's not a Coke. But yeah, those 20 ounces, you would open it, and sometimes you'd win a free one. You just take the lid in, and they'd give it to you at the store, and the store would send off the lid and get reimbursed for that. But then later on, they'd just go to those online codes you enter, and it's like with Doritos, they had in the late 90s, they had those things called ploids. We called them chip points, where on Doritos or Fritos or Lay's or any one of their that was in that Frito-Lay company that was, you know, had Doritos and Ruffles and Cheetos and all that. You get ploids, as they called them, and there's little points you could save up and turn them all in for prizes. It was really a different time in the 90s with giving away stuff like that. That the electronic age of the early 2000s kind of ruined with, you know, enter this code, and it just takes all the fun away, you know. I'd much rather open a cereal and, you know, get a prize at the bottom than, you know, enter this code and they'll do this, you know. It takes all the fun out of it. The last one I'll talk about, a lot of people always talk about, is Blockbuster video rental cards. They're obsolete because they don't exist anymore. Yeah, good old Blockbuster, or Hollywood Video, Family Video, and I'm sure a lot, especially with smaller towns, had their own locally owned one video store. But yeah, of course, obsolete these days. Streaming everything, physical media. Sorry. Physical media, just nobody cares about. I still love physical media. I got like 200 something DVDs and Blu-rays that I'll always keep. Don't care how much room it takes up, because I know that it can't be taken away. Like with streaming, you pay for all these services, multiple streaming services, and sometimes you don't even have the movie you want. Then you got to find out you got it. Oh, you can rent it off of Amazon for $10. It's they've really got our hopes up with this streaming. Like, you know, with the early days of some of these streaming services, you know, people were cutting cable left and right. It was like, you know, only paying, you know, not even a third of what they paid for cable, and they get all this streaming stuff and watch whenever they want. And now all the services are increasing their prices, and they're adding more services, which is making all the content split now even more. So it costs more nowadays to have all these streaming services than it does cable. It's idiotic. In any way, back then, in a simpler time, you could go to Blockbuster, like I said, Hollywood Video, or any of those. You could rent a tape, and then of course later on DVDs and video games, and just it'd be a local hangout spot for a lot of teenagers. Of course, I was growing up different. I wasn't allowed to leave the house, or I guarantee I would have been there. Just like, you know, it's so fun browsing a video store, because you never know what you're going to see in there. And the whole atmosphere, and of course Blockbuster, you know, was the main one. Of course, now all that's gone and obsolete. The only renting Redbox, I think, is gone now too. That pretty much took over the rental thing. But yeah, Netflix killed Blockbuster, basically. You have them to thank for that. But yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things that you miss a lot. But, you know, like I said, modern technology, when it works and it's not being greedy, you know, you can watch all this stuff on demand, you know. You can watch a whole, like, series that had, like, maybe 12, 13, whatever seasons that you wouldn't have been able to catch up on from Blockbuster, or, you know, maybe you wouldn't have been able to binge watch while it was on TV because it was going at the time. So, you know, there's a trade-off there. You know, there's a lot of good things about technology today, and then there's a lot of bad things. Like I said, the fact that they can just take something off a streaming service, you know, without any warning, without any reason, and, you know, they don't give you a reimbursement, even if you're in the middle of watching it. They don't care. You know, then you got to go find what streaming service is going on next. If it is, it might be off of all of them. But anyway, it was definitely a simpler time whenever you could just, you know, you wanted to see a movie, you go spend a couple dollars, you can get it for a couple days over the weekend, you know, watch it over and over again, take it back. Just a different time. Of course, it was different for me. I wasn't able to go there as much. Whenever I did, it was with Marky Foe, and sometimes he'd let us pick out a movie. But anyway, like I said, this June of 1993, I was in between 3rd and 4th grade, which means this was my first summer in Norwood. And Norwood is one of the many suburbs of Cincinnati in Hamilton County, Ohio. I think I remember briefly us living there when I was younger, when my mom was with my brother Josh's dad. I almost said my brother Josh's boyfriend. It killed me. His dad. I think we might have lived there during the early part of when Josh was born, and then we ended up moving to Kentucky. And I told that story where that idiot beat me in the head with a freaking broom and gave me a concussion. But before that, I think we briefly lived there. But then when my mom met my Clint wasn't born at this time. He was born next year. But his dad, Mark, the great Marky Foe, as I always refer to him, that stepdad. Well, I can remember them stepfather movies? I could make some movies based on my experiences that would blow that movie away. But anyway, during this time, things weren't too bad yet. But yeah, Norwood was a town that I would end up, you know, growing to just, you know, explore and know more of. But at this time, you know, we were confined there. We were on, I told this before, we were on Section Avenue. At this time, we were in the first house we moved into. We'd eventually moved into the house next to it. But at this time, we were the very last house in Norwood. Literally the house next to us, where this old black woman that, like, pulled a shotgun on Marky Foe one time. That's a whole other story I've told before. But anyway, her house was considered the neighborhood Bond Hill. Ours was considered Norwood. Her address was I can't remember what that was. Rhode Island. Her address was whatever number, Rhode Island. Ours was Section Avenue, right next to each other on the same street. But I don't, for some, and not a lot of cities, like when it changed cities, they changed the street. But I don't know, for some reason this one did. Yeah, but that half was Rhode Island. We were on the start of the Section Avenue street. By the way, there was a Section Road too in Norwood, I think. Or was that farther? I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, we were in this house that we were renting, and we ended up buying a house. I told this before, but I don't want to keep going over the same stories of trying to just paint the picture of where we lived at, and the first summer there. I didn't know a lot of the kids, so we were just kind of me and Josh, and Travis was only how old was Travis at this time? Only a couple years old, so it wasn't like he was outside. But whenever we got to go outside, it was me and Josh, and we would do our different things, entertain each other, and didn't have a lot of friends at this time. Like I said, we'd end up meeting a bunch of kids around the neighborhood and have a lot of fun with them. But yeah, this time it was pretty much just us, getting used to the neighborhood. Of course, I get to go up to UDF, my favorite store ever, and get breakfast on the weekends. Marky Foe was home and get him a newspaper. Another obsolete things. You don't just go to the store for the newspaper anymore. But yeah, there was a park in between there. It was called Hunter Park. We didn't get to spend a whole lot of time there, but when we did, it was fun. And I just remember like all the different things. Like, I was weird. Like, when I walk up to the store, just like as a way to entertain myself, I would just make up stories in my head. The way you do as kids. Just explore and just memorize. Like, I would sit there and count like the steps it'd take, and next time try to see if I could take the exact same amount of steps. Just the weird things you do to entertain each other. But yeah, Norwood, when we were growing up, there was a great place to live. I know there's more violence there, just like with Price Hill. That's where I was born, pretty much, or where I lived right after I was born. That place, I don't know if I'd ever visit it again. There's so much violence there, but yeah. And we've lived in a couple of different parts of Norwood. This is the part we lived in from 9 years old to, I don't know, I think I was in the 8th grade when we moved away from that part. And then when we moved back, it would be a little further up on Alvina Avenue. And that was a different part of Norwood. We hardly ever got back down to the old part, because there was a Fenwick Park there, not Fenway. Yeah, we went to Fenway Park in Boston. No, Fenwick Park, which was a bigger park, and there's no reason to go down to Hunter Park anymore, and really no reason to explore the old neighborhood except the couple times we snuck back into Marky Foe's house. I'll tell that story later on. About just remind me of that. Marky Foe had these like old like pops from like the 1960s and beers, like classic cans that he'd saved since after we moved out. I'll just go ahead and tell it now. After we moved out and all the crap he did, and the reason we moved out, which I've told before, we snuck back in there and we opened all the stuff and poured it out. I bet he was so mad. I don't care. I'm surprised he didn't call the cops on us. But yeah, we would sneak back in there and dump all those out. That was like the first thing I did. I was like, oh, his prized possession, huh? Admitted to a crime on freaking the internet here. Well, he's dead. I don't think he's going to press charges. But anyway, that was a little bit about Norwood then. Still got a lot more to talk about on that in different times. Do want to talk about, as we're winding up here, do want to talk about a couple movies that came out this month. Dennis the Menace, which I mentioned before, the cartoon. The Dennis the Menace movie from the 90's. That thing was crazy. A lot of people talk about the scene where the guy that was going around robbing everybody, played by Christopher Lloyd, he was eating beans out of a can and farting, and Dennis the Menace. Just, that movie was crazy. Walter Matthau as Mr. Wilson played that role perfectly. Of course, he's known as from Grumpy Old Men, but he played that role perfectly. Can't remember who played his wife, but that was a perfect role too. She was just like the perfect Mrs. Wilson. That movie was just crazy. And then another movie that came out that I'm not a huge fan of, but I did watch the first one. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan, but a lot of people love this series. The very first Jurassic Park. We've seen it in theaters. And I've told this story before, but when the second one came out, I didn't care to watch it anyway, but I was grounded, so I wasn't allowed to go out and watch it when they went. I stayed home and discovered, for the first time on TV, USWA wrestling. I'd never seen it before. And they just started broadcasting it on our local Channel 25, the same one that showed ECW. Has nothing to do with Jurassic Park. It just hit my microphone. I always remember that whenever I think of Jurassic Park. I always think of when everybody went to the second movie and I wasn't allowed to go. I stayed home and watched wrestling and had more fun. But yeah, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Jurassic Park. It was okay. I know a lot of people are huge fans of it. It's nothing wrong. It's just not my type of movie. But like, it was the start of a franchise and a whole like big thing because Jurassic Park was a huge movie. The last thing I'm going to talk about is some kids' meal toys, because I always talk about those. Happy Meal at this time had a partnership with Nickelodeon. They gave out Nickelodeon game gadgets. And this was a set of Nickelodeon toys, including a Nick blimp that squirts for the 3 and under, because you know they always had those toys for the little kids, the 3 and under, so they didn't, typically something that they wouldn't be able to choke on, basically. But it was like a squirt toy. A loud mouth mic, and it's one of those microphones that, if you remember those, if you hit it, you can hear like a spring inside, but it like amplifies your voice. It's not like an actual microphone. One of those type things. They had applause paws, which was like these little clappy things that you pulled the thing on it and they clapped. I'm sure that annoyed parents that got those all the time. And then a Gotcha Gusher, which was like a water squirting toy, and then there was like a blimp game. So yeah, Nickelodeon definitely had a good partnership with McDonald's. Burger King had a partnership now with Disney. They put out the Little Mermaid outdoor toys. It was based on the TV series, not the movie. There's a set of 2 wind-up toys and a set of 2 squirting toys. Of course, this is June, so the restaurants are giving out all these outdoor toys. And then Pizza Hut also had a Disney deal. They had Aladdin toys to celebrate the home video release of Disney's Aladdin. And you get the kids' pizza pack with that, where you get a personal pan pizza, Aladdin-themed cup, and also one of 3 different Aladdin toys that that were related to the movie. So yeah, that's definitely not always what they'd have for kids' meals, but definitely the movie tie-ins were definitely big. Sometimes they would just have, McDonald's characters or like Burger King Kids Club characters, but their biggest sellers were always the movie tie-ins or a TV show or a company like Nickelodeon. But it's been a fun one. Seems like it's flown by. Maybe it's dragged on. I don't know. You never know when I'm done with these how long they've actually been. But I had a lot of fun. It's great to get back to my normal routines right now after dealing with this, being in a hospital bed and having to freaking switch my IVs so much because I was on vancomycin and the stuff was irritating me and the IVs would hurt, and it was a nightmare that I hope I never have to go through again. But I'm glad to come out the other side of it better. Glad to get to talk to you guys again. Next time we're going to be on episode number 55. We're going to go ahead a couple years in the future. We're going to go back to September of 1995. I was 11 years old at the time and just getting ready to start my journey in middle school in the 6th grade. I talked a little bit about that before, but I'll probably rehash some old stories just because, that's what I do sometimes, I'll talk about things and I'll forget about it. I talk about other things or another detail will come back to me. I was like, I didn't mention this, so... if you've heard some of these stories before, I'm sorry. If you haven't, check out some of the old podcasts, or I'll just keep telling them again so you don't have to. Anyway, be on the lookout for that next week, and I hope you guys have a good week, and I'll see you next time.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station. For another hideous, hateful haul of horror.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale